All systems go. Clear for liftoff.
What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy GS Luke here with our round 4 live stream out there for the CJ Cup Byron Nelson. Going to get you ready for all of your showdown lineups. But first off, a weather report, some DFS strategy for you as well. A look at the shots gained metrics and how you can use those out there for your round 4 exposure. A little bit of contest selection, lineup construction to go ahead and put it all together. And of course, any of your questions down there in the chat as well. So hopefully you're having a fantastic Saturday. Today's showdown slate ended up being a pretty good one for yours truly. So hopefully you guys are able to take some of that information from the stream and go out there and have some success yourselves. And if not, hey, you got round 4 to go out there and get back at them. Let's go ahead and get ready to do so. We got sites down there in the chat nice and early. I appreciate the kind words. Says, yeah, 2 shows in 12 hours. Some dedication there for sure, but you love golf. We love talking it over here with you guys, so it's no big deal at all. You got Go Collect down there talking about the 14.2K Scotty. Yeah, that'll for sure be a talking point we get to. We got Jay Ramos down there, James Romanowski as well, who says, shout out to Nick, LSU Nick, who we see in the live streams quite a bit. Great call on Rosner, and yeah, he's a real bright guy down there in the chat. Sites had some success in some of the overlays today. I did myself. Chris down there, and yeah, Rosner, I used him in a bunch of my lineups. He was a prototypical short game regression candidate. A lot of guys that popped off that we talked about. So hopefully you guys went out there, were able to take advantage in your lineups and trying to run it back out here for Sunday. And he said, surely Scotty's 100%, but there's zero way you can fade him. Yeah, we'll mention it, Nick. It's a real tough one if you're going to go out there and try and fade him. If you do, it would only be in the lotteries, and we'll talk about those kind of scenarios. How many strokes did Scotty have? I have no idea, but luckily, man, you can check it out on the leaderboard, and I believe it was like 66 or something like that, maybe 65. Either way, a crazy good round. Yeah, 66 after following it up with the -10 and -8 rounds. We'll get you an 8-stroke lead out there. But let's talk about the course conditions here and what to expect out there for tomorrow. So first thing I want to look at would be the scoring averages between the first and second half, which we had 3 sums off of both tees. So it's not like you had a massive difference in course conditions, but towards the latter half of the day, you did have the winds die down. And I don't think this entire difference here, it was over a stroke difference between the first and second half, was due to those winds dying down. But for the last 2 hours of play, I mean, it was perfect out there. 60, 70 degrees, something in that range. They had no wind to speak of. Those guys were throwing darts. You saw a lot of birdies from your guys towards the top on that last 9. Pretty easy holes to finish, but even on some of the more difficult ones, you saw people going out there and making birdie, which you weren't seeing out there in the first half, which I think is partially due to the weather, but also the talent level of those top tier guys, players that are in form to begin with up there at the top. You're going to see a bias towards those players anyways. So out there for the round 3 tee times, we're not 100% sure whether it's going to be 2 sums off of 1 or potentially 3 sums off of holes 1 and 10 again. But I will say that they have enough time now that we finished all of round number 3 today to go out there and do 2 sums if they want to. So we're going to check back a little bit later and see if they upload the tee times. I'm assuming it's 2 sums, but we won't say anything definitive until we actually see that here later on. But the weather for tomorrow looks absolutely perfect, whether you're going off early or a little bit later on in the day. I think you're going to have pristine conditions. Now, if they are starting on 2 sums and your first few groups off are starting around 7 a.m. local, then those guys you might actually want to avoid because first off, they're at the bottom end of the board. They might go out there and bitch quit in a lot of cases, but also it's going to be a little bit cooler, like you can see in this HRRR forecast, closer to 53 degrees over there in the morning. And if you were watching the play early today over there in ESPN Plus, those guys were struggling in those 50-degree temperatures. So if they are on 2 sums, I wouldn't want to go after the first 3 groups out, partially because of form, but also because of the temperatures there rising around 9 or 10 a.m. So if you go a little bit later on into the morning wave to try and find some of your diamonds in the rough, some of your lower owned players for some leverage, I would like going after guys starting close to this pocket of tee time. So maybe ideally around 10 a.m. would be the perfect tee time out there for tomorrow, where you're going to still get the receptiveness of the greens earlier in the day, but also the warmer temperatures and next to no wind for the entire round. The winds are pretty much consistent the entire day. I mean, you're talking about 2, maybe 3 mile-an-hour differences at the very most and pockets during the day. So I don't really think that that's the main factor to focus on. I think it's the receptiveness, and then of course that temperature, which if you can find guys that are going off in moderate temperatures and that get receptive greens, I think that that's the perfect pocket to look after. So a lot of this is going to depend on whether it is 3-sums off of both tees, or if they decide to do the 2-sums off of hole number 1. If it's 2-sums off of hole number 1, just to go back to the leaderboard over there, that's most likely going to be the guys in like this pocket of the board, like the -6, maybe even the -7s that are getting those really good tee times that you're not really using for placement point purposes, but more so just for a little bit of a weather edge. And on Sunday Showdown, you're going to have some placement points towards the top. Scotty Scheffler, the obvious candidate to go out there and use for that sort of thing, but you're also going to need 1 or 2, maybe even 3 guys towards the middle to the bottom end of the board to go and use for some leverage. So if you're looking for some of that leverage, especially in those big GPPs, these could be a really good way to differentiate yourself, even if you're using and I haven't ran projections out there for ownership quite yet, but maybe like an 80% projected owned Scotty Scheffler, something insane like that. Hell, it might even be like 90% projected owned Scotty Scheffler for all we know tomorrow. These kind of guys are going to be key to differentiate off of that, because you're essentially sharing one of your 6 spots with the entire field in a lot of those different contests. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, you might just have to go out there and play Scotty Scheffler for tomorrow. This could be the portion of the board that you use to differentiate that. So we'll take a look at the tee times when we get the PGA Tour to drop that. I would be expecting that any minute now. So probably in the next 5 to 10 minutes, we'll get that updated over there. So maybe after we go through the shots gained metrics, we can circle back and look at some of that stuff. So I'm actually going to go over here and bet the number and refresh the shots gained profiles, so we have everything up to date for the round being completed. And we'll go through our process over there for building a player pool. So we've gone through the weather already. I don't think that there's a massive edge towards either side. You're going to have to play guys across all tee times just because it's a Sunday Showdown slate. Placement point aspect, leverage aspect, as we already outlined, but maybe a slight advantageous conditions there towards the late morning. But the bigger thing you want to focus on before building our lineups is going to be finding a good player pool. And up top, if you're going to try and find some of your conviction plays, starting in that top 5, top 10, hell, your placement points, I would even go the whole way down to this like -11s, maybe even the -10s out there for placement points. Because if you shoot a -6 tomorrow, which with the low winds, I think you're going to see some low rounds out there. Still going to be soft, might not be lift, clean, and place again, but you'll still see some guys that go out there and shoot like -6, that kind of thing. If you do that starting at -10, you might not quite finish top 5, but you're going to sneak into the top 10 most likely. If you do that sort of thing, just maybe on the fringe of that at the very worst, I'd say, if you're starting there at -10, and that might be enough with the -6 scoring, the placement points that you're getting for that just outside that top 10 there, that might be the kind of plays that you want for your quote unquote placement points too. But if you're starting at like -11, -12, you for sure have that within your range of outcomes. I think a lot of the field is going to go to these -7s for a lot of those placement points. The top 5 obviously going to get the kind of steam that you normally see, 20 to 30% ownership on a lot of the guys starting up there in the top 5. But if you go just a little bit lower and you get to these T13s, these T23s down there, I think it's an intriguing part of the board to go out there and attack. So these kind of guys for some placement points, maybe going a little bit further down for some of the better tee times, right? Like maybe 2 guys in this range, maybe like 2 guys in this range too, where you're not getting as chalky, and then 2 guys towards the top where you've got maybe your Scotty, and then 1 guy starting in the top 5, 2 guys that are a little bit sneakier when it comes to the placement points, and then the 2 guys at the bottom where you're really getting different to the field. Whether it's in large field GPP or in single entries, I really like that kind of lineup construction for tomorrow. So let's look at the top end of the board and use these shots gained metrics to our advantage. What you can see at the top is that by far the best ball striker over the 3 rounds has been Scotty Scheffler. So that combined with the fact that he's starting with an 8-stroke lead. I know he's expensive up there at over $14,000, but I'm expecting almost everyone to use him out there in lineups. And I don't necessarily think that that is a mistake given his projection. I haven't projected. I was running just a dry set before we got on here for over 70 fantasy points, which is just for a single round on Showdown. It's getting inflated by the 13 fantasy points that he's almost for sure going to get for finishing in first place. But he's already on a raw point projection around this golf course, projecting for like 60 fantasy points per round. I mean, moving day pins today, you saw him go out there and only get to -5. tomorrow without any wind, his floor is realistically like a -4, -5 round. So Scotty Scheffler up top with these ball striking stats hasn't even been particularly that strong out there with the short game. I know somebody before said it's like you can't go out there and fade him. I don't know if I would go that far, but I would say that it is one of the bolder decisions that I've ever seen if you go out there and fully fade Scotty Scheffler tomorrow. Now, going 50-50 and like a 150 max, I think is a decision that you could go with. But if you do go with like 50% Scotty tomorrow, you are going to be well under the field. If you plan on getting any sort of leverage out there on him over there at -23, you're going to quite literally have to use them in every single lineup that you play. So I'm kind of siding towards that right now. I'm thinking I'm going to lock them out there in all my lineups. I'm not 100% sold on that quite yet. I'm going to have to look at the 9-10K range, see if there's any opportunity costs that I just can't pass up over there in that portion of the board. If there's 1-2 guys that I just have to go out there and throw into my player pool, then maybe it's like a 70% Scotty Scheffler that I'm going out there and playing, but he's going to be in a vast majority of my builds for tomorrow. So outside of him up top, and if we're going to use another guy starting in this top 5, we've got to find a few of our favorites. And just based on the ball striking stats, that's what I like to rely on. It's the most consistent part of golf. Castillo would be the number 1 guy there. You also have Eric Van Rooyen gaining over 7.5 strokes, whereas maybe Sam Stevens wouldn't be the best play because he's been more short game dependent. So of these guys, like T7 or better, like maybe you go to a Højgaard. He's gained over nearly 6 strokes over there with the ball striking categories. Even an Echeverria down here at T7 there at -13 has gained over 9 strokes over there with the ball striking stats. These are the kind of guys that you're going to likely see me using as conviction plays, especially for an Echeverria who has been so consistent with the iron play all week. And Eric Van Rooyen feels like a player I'm likely going to go out there and throw in. And then also Ricky Castillo over here at T2. He's the kind of guy that I've played this entire week. I used him in main slate. I used him today over there in Showdown, and I don't see the reason to jump off. He's been ball striking heavy for pretty much the entire week. Did make a few putts today, which was a nice little bonus out there on his back 9, but the ball striking, even from some rough spots off the tee, his off the tee was subpar for his standards out there in round number 3. Looked really impressive out there with the iron. So those are the kind of guys that you're going to see me using as conviction plays. When I'm looking at the full event stuff, it's normally for these guys at the top end of the board. I won't use that for the guys down low because if I'm trying to find a diamond in the rough, the week-long stats on the guys down there at like T45 aren't going to look very good, right? I mean, they've just been slightly above average, if not below average, now that they've already had their round 3 counted. So you're not really going to see a lot of positive out here in these shots gained metrics. That's why I reserve them for the top end of the board. And the kind of guys that get a huge downtick out here for a round 4 would be your Johnny Vegases that have gained like 5 strokes putting, and Andrew Putnam that's gained 6 strokes putting. Like, I just have a hard time thinking that he's going to gain 10 strokes putting this week. A Sam Burns, probably not a guy that I'm going to be over the field on there in that 10K range. Patrick Rogers has been very lucky in the 2 short game categories. Cam Champ, Vince Whaley, also a Mark Hubbard down there, getting 5 strokes in the short game, are players that you won't see me taking for a lot of those placement points. On the other side of things, I like to look at the round 3 stats to try and find some of my guys a little bit further down the board, and especially if we're going to look for guys with that quote-unquote weather edge, like the T37s, like the T46s or whatever they are, starting a little bit earlier in the day. If we're looking to get different to the field, if we can find guys that hit the ball well today, could be a look for tomorrow. So for example, a Victor Perez over here, starting at T46, he gained just over 2 strokes between the 2 ball striking categories, and then a little bit over 2 strokes lost over there with the around the green and putting. So the kind of player that I'd expect to regress positively in the both sides of that. And then a few other guys that would kind of make sense for that. Carl Phillips, he had a really good approach day today, but just could not buy a putt for his life. He's in one of my really big lineups this week, and I followed him almost every shot today over there in the shot tracker. He had misses from 3 feet, 5 feet, 6 feet, 7 feet for birdie out there today. Phillips is normally a much, much better putter than that. And if he hits the ball like he did today, I mean, he had a double bogey on 12, which was due to a lost ball off the tee. His round was solid, -2 rounds. It could have been like -7 solid. So you'll see me using guys like Phillips in that little portion of the leaderboard where perhaps they get slightly softer greens. Who else can we find on here? So those would be the main examples like out there with the ball striking round number 3. You can also look for some short game regression candidates. So if we go to the guys that lost a whole bunch putting, maybe they have a little bit of a better day out there tomorrow. So for example, Nicholas Norgard-Muller could not buy a putt for his life. I mean, he was missing from within 10 feet for the entire day. Kind of like a Phillips, if he had just made his putts from 10 feet and in, he shoots something a lot more respectable than his +1, probably something closer to -4. That's how bad the putting was out there for Nicholas Norgard-Muller. So that's the kind of player that could regress back to the mean and be a lot better tomorrow. Cam Davis fits that same sort of description. I wish that they were a little bit better with their irons today. That's really the only thing I could nitpick and say about those two kind of players. But whether it's the putting over here or the around the green stats, you can use these to your advantage. So Højgaard, for example, you're trying to find a guy towards the very bottom end of the board to go out there and play. I try to be a little bit more realistic. That's why guys like Victor Perez were the kind of players that I was pointing out as potential targets. But if you wanted to get real nasty in GPPs and throw in Højgaard to try and get a sub 10% owned player out there with your Scotty Scheffler lineups, then maybe he regresses to the mean around the green. He's going to have a much better ball striking day than what he had out there today. But anything's possible out here in golf. It's an extremely volatile sport. We have more chaos in this sport than really anyone we go out there and trying to handicap in this DFS space. And knowing that and kind of embracing that over here from the showdown aspect is always key. And I try and remind you guys this as many times as humanly possible. But over a 72-hole event, when we have 4 rounds to work with, 4 full whole days of guys getting to wake up, sometimes they're going to feel great. Sometimes they probably aren't going to feel their best. Even over 4 whole days, there's a ton of variance on these events. I mean, shit. We had Davis Riley winning last year out of nowhere after like 8 missed cuts. We've had some guys like 100 to 1 or more winning over the last 6 or so months out there on tour. Let alone all the other crazy stories of guys finishing top 5, top 10 that you've had even more so over that kind of stretch. Guys like Højgaard, just because he didn't play well today, right? That does not mean he's going to go out there and struggle again tomorrow. This is that kind of sport where you got to kind of throw out some of these stats at times. Not to say that they're not valuable. You do want to look at them, especially when it comes to the ball striking. If there's anything that's a little bit more consistent from round to round, it is these ball striking categories. So that's why we focus on them a lot more than the other categories, and why these short game categories, which are a lot more variant, I kind of throw it to the side sometimes, right? If you lost 2-3 strokes out there in the short game categories, I'll oftentimes be very quick to go out there and forgive those sort of players. So I'll see if there's any player deep dives that you guys want from me down there in the chat. Before I do so, I want to see if they have these round 4 tee times on here, and it looks like they do. And it is 2 sums off of hole number 1. So that's what I was thinking they were going to do, given that they finished all of the play out there today. So your first tee time, this would be 7 a.m. local time over there. So these sort of players, you probably want to avoid, I'd say, out there in lineups. So unfortunately for Højgaard, even though he might bounce back, he doesn't have the best tee time setup, I would say, just because it's going to be so cold out there in the morning. Just to remind you guys, about 50-something degrees out there at about 7 a.m. So if I want to find guys that are a better tee time out there, maybe you go to like the 9, 10 a.m. guys for some of that leverage. So you go a little bit further down here to like the Phillips, right? We mentioned him. He was checking a lot of the boxes that we were looking for before. Victor Perez, that same kind of thing. So like Harry Hall, Nicholas Norgard-Muller, we were looking for a little bit of a potential bounce back from. A lot of this portion of the board is where I'm going to try and find some of those plays towards the bottom. Again, to remind you guys, we want like 2 guys that are pure leverage plays down here towards the bottom, 2 guys that are kind of towards the middle end of the board, and then 2 guys up there at the top to go out there and really give you those placement points. So let me see if there's any specific player deep dives we need to do, and then head over to DraftKings afterwards and talk through that side of things. Let me get a sip of water too. It's been a while since we stopped talking there. That was a long monologue, huh? So Nick said, surely Scotty 100%. So let's go back to that comment. If you're going to play him, you go 100%. Like I would say, unless you're a 150 maxer, I mentioned maybe doing the 50% thing. But for most people out there that are watching this live stream that are entering a couple single entries, maybe a 20 max, maybe like 30, 40 lineups out there in the big GPPs, go all in or go 0 on Scotty. That would be my recommendation on it. Shipped the $5 and 5th in the $20 today. Let's go. Good stuff, Hunter. Always like to see chat going out there and having some success. cheers to you out there. Sorry it's only a water, but we're taking it easy tonight. It was an okay day, but you're looking forward to tomorrow. Cheers to that too, right? Not every day is going to be a massive one, but tomorrow could be that for you, Ed. So let's get after it. Scotty currently minus 20,000. Yeah, dude, he was what, minus like 50K after hole number 3. That is just crazy. Yeah, I think Perez could be a decent value play. Good tee time, good stat profile, especially with the 2 sums off of hole number 1. I think he makes even more sense. So I'm definitely in play there. He said, watch all the showdown shows, Luke. Love the content and much appreciated. Of course, Hunter, let's try and run it back for you out there tomorrow. He said, Luke, you just won me first and second place in the $5. Thanks for your hard work. Love to see that from chat, guys. And it was a last second live stream, so maybe it was the good vibes over there in the morning. Let's see if we can run it back out there for tomorrow. You hope it's not preferred lies. I do too. And I will say with the sun and the wind today that there's definitely a chance that they play the ball up. So we'll have to see. Does the irrigation system drain the green or the fairway as well? It's the whole golf course. So that's actually why they haven't had that much trouble with the rains this week, is they added a drainage system since the last year. So it's the whole golf course, though. You said, no need to twist your arm, Luke. You'll fire Ross Steelman out there one more time. Yeah, he had a pretty okay day. I don't think he had anything life-changing with the score, but he's not going to play terribly for you, all right? What did he do? A -2 today, so about an average round, I guess. Yeah, run him out there again, man. He's your namesake. If he's in the field, I'd probably be using him if I were you. He said, how are Toasty stats? Not very good, at least for round number 3. They're not going to be that impressive for you. He lost with the putter, lost around the green, and I hate to say I told you it was coming, but I kind of did over there this morning. The kind of guy that you play when he's low owned. You don't use him when he's steamed up, he's chalk out there on Showdown. You use him when nobody's using him. And I'll say for tomorrow, no one's going to use an Alejandro Toasty. He's going off early, which from the tee time perspective is sub-ideal. It's going to be a little bit colder when he's teeing off. Is that the end of the world, though? No, like you could still get there as one of those players going off early. And considering that no one's going to use them, we're talking about sub 5% ownership on pretty much everyone up here, like maybe Benny Ann, Hoygaard, Cam Davis get slightly over that 5% or right around that 5% number. But everyone else down here, like in a large field GPP, you're getting infinite leverage if you throw them in there. So yeah, I don't want to talk too much crap on my guy Toasty because I sure hope he goes out there and makes like 7 or 8 birdies. But it's a real grimy play. Like you only use them if you have to get that different. Is McGreevy an option, or not sure what you're saying there at the beginning? Something about McGreevy. I'm assuming you're just asking about how he sets up. We can take a look at the stat profile for you. Maybe give you some information there. If it'll let me type in his name. So McGreevy went out there today and gained 2.5 strokes putting. That's not the greatest thing to see, but he was into the positive with the irons. Around the green, slightly positive. Could he get there? For sure. Is he my favorite stat profile, though? No, because when you take a look at the entire event this week, he's lost strokes with the ball striking, and he's gained over there with the short game. So he is an option, especially because I played him in my main slate. I hope he goes out there and proves me wrong. But from the stat perspective, he's a 4 out of 10 at best. Like he's, doing it in the wrong ways. At least if you're looking for sustainable sort of shots gained metrics. All right, let's go over to DraftKings, and the contest selection is a lot better than what you had for round number 3, which you would expect without them having as much unknown with the weather. So the big GPPs, this $25 150 max, it is a third to first place, 50K of that 150K, which is usually going to keep me out of playing in those kind of contests. Even if I play a GPP, I'm looking for like 20, 30%, 20, maybe 25% out there the first place. When you're getting to 30%, it's just when it's far too fishy for me to go out there and play. And this big 555, it's also super top heavy. Not even going to click it because it's top heavy every single day. You have this 30K, $250 max. You can put 4 entries into this one. It's a pretty standard, I'd say, out here for these showdown slates. So it's not a good slate for the contest. It's not a bad one either. Pretty much all the contests are exactly what we're used to seeing. The GPP that I'm likely going to put about 50 entries in is this $5. You've got a 6th over there to first place, so a lot better than a third to first, right? It's half of that out there to first place, which isn't the best payout structure, but it's a lot better than it could be. So this is the kind of payout structure that you're going to see me entering entering a lot more than other people out there. And the reason for that is that because you're not putting 10K to first, like if this was 10K to first, a third to first, like no, thank you. I would not be about that whatsoever, because the rest of these payouts, like second, third, fourth, and fifth, you'd be getting nothing for it. If I'm going to throw 50 lineups in here, that's $250 out here in this sort of contest. I want to at least win more than my entry fees out there for a top 10. And in most cases in the top 10, you're going to win at least close to all of those 50 entries that I'm entering, if not slightly into the profit, right? With anything into the top 5. So that's usually why I try and target these kind of contests, is so that if you don't hit the absolute nuts, you can still have a pretty good day. So that would be my recommendation for anyone that's entering like 20, 30 lineups into any of those big GPPs. Frankly, you should be 150 maxing if you can. I usually don't, but if you can, that's the ideal strategy in those contests. You've got this $44 6 entry over there for tomorrow. It's actually not too terrible of a payout structure there. So I may consider going out there and actually max entering that one. You've got the Albatross, the Caddy. I'll probably max enter those ones again. And where's the $33 single entry? I probably went past it before. Yeah, the Dogleg right here. That's another really good payout structure. It's a little bit over 10% to first, but that one's okay. The Caddy, the Albatross that we had down there before are also rated about 10, maybe 15%. That they're giving out there to first place, which is the kind of payout structure that you want out there in most cases. So I would say if you're somebody that has a $200 budget, I'd probably enter some of those single entries, $33, $12, $5, maybe even a $100 single entry on top of that. And then with my last $50, maybe I take 10 entries out there in the $5 GPP and I get some GPP exposure that way, right? Going after some more leveraged lineups to try and take down something big. If you don't have any desire to do that, then take that $50 and allocate it towards some more single entries out there for your slate. So that's where I would focus a majority of your exposure. If you have that $200 budget, just please, for the sake of everything that is good out there, don't put 8 entries into this $25 GPP. 8 entries against guys that have 150 is a losing game. You're never going to win out there in that sort of contest, or at least you're not going to win very often against 7,000 people with just 8 entries to go with. I don't want to say that it's impossible to have success in those kind of builds, but you'd be just so much better suited taking that $200 and putting it across more sustainable contests. So if you have any other questions about that, you want to know why I'm so passionate about saying that, you can just ask and I can clarify it for you. But hopefully it gives you guys an idea. In terms of your lineup construction, we're going to kind of go through that strategy I was talking about before, where you maybe start with 2 guys towards the very top end of the board, and then you move a little bit further down the board for your last two more like pods of 2. So let's just show you what it looks like. It's a lot easier to show you rather than to explain it. Let's throw in a Scotty Scheffler and let's throw in an Eric Van Rooyen. There at $7,300. If you remember, Eric Van Rooyen had really good shots gained ball striking stats, and he's starting over there at T2. So obvious position for placement points. What I'd like to do for the next 2 players here is go a little bit further down the board to these T13s and these T23s. This portion of the board over here is still going to have placement point potential, but they're not going to be as chalky as these top end players. So if we're entering a contest like this big $25 or the big $5, where you'll see my lineups out there for tomorrow, you're going to be able to get some leverage on these players, right? Not as much leverage as your bottom 2 players, but you're not sharing them with like a third of the field like you have with these top 2. In the case of Scotty, sharing them with like 85, 90% of the field. Who knows? Out there for tomorrow. Down here, this next portion of the board, though, you're still looking to try and get some leverage. So let's throw in a Danny Walker there. Danny Walker had a really good day today. Let's throw in a Chandler Phillips. Hope he makes a few more putts over there for tomorrow. Starting at a decent position where if they shoot a -5, -6, they can get us into that top 5, top 10. And then for your last 2 players is where I like to go really far down the board and try and find some leverage. So let's throw in the Phillips. I already mentioned him having some potential putting regression. Then I'm going to sort it by salary. And I think like let's see, we have enough for a $7,500 player here. Let's take another guy that's at like T37. So Norgard Muller could be a really good option for this. Sorry, we can't go through all 6. I forgot. The DraftKings police over there, I'll get mad if we go through all 6 players. But if you use somebody that was a little bit lower owned, like maybe a Bramlett, maybe a Muller, like we have there at $7,200, you could leave a little bit of salary on the table. That can give you a better chance of not duplicating yourself out there with other people. And you can get a player that's going off early and potentially with better conditions than what you have a little bit later on. So that's what I'm looking at out there for my lineup construction segment, kind of like 3 pods of 2 across the board. And if you want to adjust a little bit, obviously do what you want out there with your lineups, but don't adjust it too much off of that kind of model. Like maybe you have 3 guys starting towards the top out there in lineups. If that's the case, then you might want 3 guys starting down there towards the bottom to offset that kind of chalk. That's why I like this 2-2-2, because it's a little bit more balanced than going like the 3-3, which is a little bit more of an extreme lineup construction. But that's how you should likely be going out there and handling a lot of your lineups. So best of luck out there with everything that you guys are going with for tomorrow. It's been a long day of golf. I know we had the 2 live streams today, so any of you sweaty tryhards that tuned into both of them, you guys are absolute legends out there. It's I know for me, it's been a little bit of exhausting day of golf for sure. So I imagine a lot of you out there probably feel the same way. But Sunday, we get finally a normal slate. None of this weather madness that we have to worry about. It can sweat out our lineups and our outright bets out there for the final day. So I've got 2 lineups currently in the top 60 of the $5 GPP. So I've got a few good sweats heading into Sunday. And last time out, when I finished in second and nearly took everything down, my lineups were in worse position than what we had heading into Sunday this time. So I need the same kind of run good that we had last Sunday to come to fruition again. And if so, it'd be 3 straight incredible weeks out there on the PGA Tour. But we're a long way from home at this point to try to go out there and make it a three-peat. But best of luck out there with all of the exposure that you guys are going with. And let me see if there's any last-second questions, because I don't want to leave you guys hanging if you have them. Let's see. Seeing 2 with similar tee times who check some boxes, can you compare Kazire and Molinax? I don't really like comparison questions, because you're kind of like asking me to tell you who to play, but I'll show you the shots gained metrics. I'm not going to tell you who I would play, though, because I frankly don't like either of those 2 from first look. So he's T23. Kazire's been pretty balanced this week. Good approach stats out there for Kazire. And then the other one was Molinax. So Molinax has been a lot more putter heavy. I know that one. So I'd probably go with Kazire, just because Molinax, as you can see, has gained 8.5 strokes putting. I know I said I wasn't going to tell you which one I would prefer, but when it's this extreme of an example, like you probably know which one I was going to tell you, right? It's definitely Kazire, because Kazire's doing it in a much more sustainable fashion. I mean, all 4 categories are positive. There's not much negative you can say about how he's played this week. Whereas over here with Molinax, there's one obvious thing that could go wrong. If he doesn't go out there and gain like 4 strokes putting, like what is he going to do for you? He's just been a little bit more than positive over there with the off the tee play, and pretty nasty in those middle two categories there. So yeah, like I said, I wasn't going to say anything, but that's a big difference there between those 2. I'd definitely go that way. And deep force on Patrick Rogers and Cam Champ, or deep dive you're looking for. Yeah, let's look at those 2. So they're not starting in like prime position or anything, but I think Patrick Rogers is T13. So definitely one of those placement point potential guys. The issue is that the approach stats have been pretty terrible for him. All right, and then who's the other one you wanted? Cam Champ. So yeah, Cam Champ, he had a quiet day today, but he still posted quite a few birdies. What was it out there today? Like 5 or 6? 4 birdies today, I guess. Overestimated his birdie production there. But for the entire week, he's been a little putter heavy too. So not my favorite play, but he's in position, man. If you like him at T13, then use him. Like, I'm not going to be the kind of guy to say he can't get there because he's been gaining a whole bunch of strokes putting. He, of course, could go out there and do it again. Is that the most likely outcome, though? Probably not. I would be remiss not to say that, right? Of course, guys, best of luck out there with all of your exposure. That is all I've got over here for Sunday. I've got some prop stuff to do, some projections to do over there for my Patreon page. Make sure to check out the SHIPIT Nation website for the stone later on tonight. With the round ended, I see no reason why they're not going to have one posted for you guys over there. And of course, for all my projections and player pool, you can find that over there on my website and Patreon page. But that's all I've got. I appreciate your support here on the channel as usual. Smash the like button for the SHIPIT Nation crew if you guys haven't already, and subscribe so you guys don't miss any of the content to come.